I'm Sharon Chickering, Esquire, and the date is May 17, 2023. I'm interviewing Betty Jo Anthony, one of the first women attorneys to practice in the Roanoke Valley of Virginia. This interview is part of the Oral History Project of the Virginia Women Attorneys Association Roanoke chapter, in which we are recording the oral histories of the first women attorneys to practice in the 23rd Judicial Circuit of the Commonwealth of Virginia. This interview is being recorded in the law office of Woods, Rogers, Van Deventer, and Black. The stenographer is Kelly Hopkins, and the videographer is Melissa Stevens. Betty Jo, do I have your permission to record this interview?
You do.
Betty Jo, can you tell us your full name, where and when you were born, and the names of your family members, and just a little bit about your childhood?
Yes, my name is Betty Jo Clark Anthony, and I was born in 1947 right here in Roanoke, Star City of the South, at Jefferson Hospital, which is no more. My parents lived in Mount Pleasant, and I have one sister. His name is Kathy, and they're all deceased, unfortunately. But you know, we had a rather idyllic childhood up to about age 9 out in the country in Mount Pleasant. Went to Mount Pleasant Elementary School, Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, and William High School.
So tell me a little bit about what you did growing up and how Roanoke was back then.
It was a great place to grow up. It was safe. We had very little traffic out in Mount Pleasant. My parents didn't own a car when I was born. My grandparents didn't own a car. Most of the neighborhood didn't, and we'd get together if somebody needed to go to the hospital or something. We played with each other up and down the streets, rode our bicycles. Nobody worried about anybody. And if you did something that was naughty, it would get home before you did. So everybody took care of everybody and their children, and it was a good place. And we had a small farm, and there were cows and horses and pigs and chickens and eggs. Wow. And so we did not want for any type of food. There was not much money around in those days, but we were happy.
That sounds lovely. Well, what is your educational background and your college experience?
I went to William High School, then applied and was accepted at West Hampton at the University of Richmond.
Okay. And
I just said that we were very poor, so it probably doesn't make very good sense that I chose to go to the University of Richmond, but Mount Pleasant Baptist Church pastor told my mother that that was a good, safe place where they had rules. And so she said, that's where I'm going to go. So I applied there and was accepted, and didn't find out for years later that I could have had basically the same education at Virginia Tech for a fourth of the cost.
Wow.
But anyway, so I went there. Then
and what year did you graduate?
1969 is what my diploma says, but I actually went through a little bit quicker and quit taking classes in 68. So I thought there was something important to do. I don't know what. And so then I moved to North Carolina and worked for Harry Winston, who's the world's largest diamond distributor.
Wow.
As a person who coordinated sales amongst their 130 or 40 nationwide chain, and then decided that maybe I would rather teach school, mostly because my mom thought I should. And so I had to go to the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and take enough courses to get the teaching certificate part. Okay. And I already had a major in psychology and a minor in math, so my math teachers are hard to come by.
They are.
So that was a good move, and then I moved to Charlottesville because that seemed like a good place to be. Then I found out that it's a hard job market because there's so many students and their spouses that want jobs. So my first job when I lived in Charlottesville was I worked at the law school and the admissions office.
Goodness.
And it just so happened that Mary Sue Terry and Charles Robb were both applying that year. And in the small world category, Mary Sue had been my roommate my freshman year at West Hampton.
Wow.
And so it was kind of like, that's weird. and I was in this is going to sound really dated, but a women's lib club with Linda Robb, Charles Robb's wife. And so, Chuck's wife, yes. So it was kind of, I mean, it felt like I was in with people I already knew a little bit. But of course now, I didn't have any authority in that office. I was a file clerk, administrative kind of person. But it was very interesting to listen to what faculty members said when they would talk about the applicants. And of course, I'm like furniture, as in that position.
Sure.
So, I mean, they talked, and I found out a little bit about the real world that I didn't know before. They talked about who could give to the university, and who would be grateful, who would probably make a good student and maybe shine and bring the university's name to the fore, and who might be wasted, by which they mostly meant women. But
Interesting.
yeah, but they never actually said that, but all the people who were going to be wasted were women. So it didn't take me too long to get the idea. So then I worked there maybe 6 months or so, and then got a teaching job in Palmyra, which is a county about half hour from Charlottesville. And I taught there in their high school for 4 years, and math.
Okay.
And then I thought, I love teaching because I love seeing people learn something. I love when the light bulb comes on. I love interacting with these high school kids. And I was not much older than they.
Right.
So it was really good in that sense. But the other half of teaching is that on your own time, you have to grade papers and make lesson plans. You have to worry about who's in the bathroom and who's in the hallway and who's punching who and whom.
Sure.
And that kind of thing. So I thought there's got to be a better way. There got to be. So I started applying around thinking, well, what really am I qualified to do? A psychology degree will get you handing out pencils in a testing center, but not much more. Mm-hmm. And then I heard about a little college, business college, that was getting ready to hire some people, and it had a really good reputation, about 150 years of service in the Richmond area.
Nice.
So I applied thinking,
Why not, right?
I can try.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hired there, Smithdale Massey Business College, and we went along, and that was the kind of teaching that is good for the soul, because you can teach, but you don't have to worry about where people are, and if they walk out of your class, they walk out. If they are in the hall, they're in the hall. You don't have to worry about it. So,
did you teach math?
I taught. In high school, to flip back, my mom, they separated people in those days into groups, and there was the vocational group,
right.
There was the business group, and there was the college-bound group.
Right.
So I was in the college-bound group because my mom said I was going to college. So, well, that's what I did. But my mother was a professional secretary, is what she would tell you. And she said that I should not get out of high school without some skills. And she said, you take whatever you want to take over there in that college-bound thing, but you are not leaving this house until you have shorthand, typing,
wow,
business accounting, and home ec. She said, when you check those 4 off, you can do anything else you want. So I did, bitterly complaining the whole way. So, and I have to say, though, to give her due, so that I have never had any class that was more beneficial to me than shorthand.
Interesting.
I have used it almost every day of my life since then. It was very helpful, as you can imagine, in law school.
Oh, yes.
And I've never had a boss who didn't appreciate being able to tell him what he said last week. You know, I can do that. So that was very helpful. So when I went to the business school, I taught math. That was the reason they primarily wanted me. But then I could fill in with shorthand typing and business accounting, and letter writing is really what it was, but they called it business English. And so I was sort of the chief cook and bottle washer, you know, and because the schedule was about the same as teaching in a public school, except that you didn't have any homework. So I decided that I could really use another job, and I went and applied and was accepted to J. Sargent Reynolds Community College.
Okay.
And did pretty much the same things, except they added in business psychology. They let me develop a little business psychology class.
What did that entail?
How to talk to people, how it's better to compliment and then suggest maybe some positive criticism rather than just smacking somebody.
Yes.
You know, so that kind of thing. How to dress for success. You know, it's better if you look your best and look people in the eye when you talk to them, and you know, just the usual stuff. And so I did that kind of thing for a year or two, I guess. And then meanwhile, the college the Smith Massey Business College, said that the rules had changed, and now in order to maintain their certification, they had to have a certain number of people who had an advanced degree.
Of course.
And I got elected because, you know, I was low man on the totem pole, so to speak. So they said, you have to start, you know, we can get exemption or extension or something if you're working on it.
Right.
So then I went home. By that time, I was married to Joe, and I was like, you know, I don't know. I don't see myself getting a degree in an advanced degree in psychology, because you need to go all the way if you're going to do that.
To a PhD, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I don't see myself getting a master's in math.
Right.
So, you know, I'm thinking, and he said, well, really, he began in the Army when he was overseas a master's degree in business administration, MBA. So he said, and he finished it up after he got back. So he said, I really think you'd enjoy that, and it would do you good to know how some business works. And, you know, hey, a business college and an MBA, you know.
Nice.
So I said, okay. So I went to VCU and signed up for an MBA program.
Wow.
And away we went. And so I was doing that mostly at night, and still keeping my J. Sargent Reynolds and my Smith Massey. So we get through that, and I'm almost at the end. I have 3 more courses to go. And I should mention that I had a lot of prerequisites to take before I could get in the master's program, because I didn't have business courses.
Right.
You know, so I had to go back and pick the college level up of that at VCU and then start in the master's. So it was a long road, and I was almost to the end, so happy. And Smith Massey called me in and said, we don't know how to tell you this, but we're bankrupt.
Oh, goodness.
And I said, what does that really mean? And they said, it means that you don't get paid for the last quarter, and we're not going to be here next year.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, my Lord. So Joe told me how to get a judgment, which turned out to be fruitless, worthless. But anyway, I learned how. And so that was something. And so I kept on with J. Sargent Reynolds. And so then there was what to do. And I thought, I'll be an FBI agent.
What a great idea.
So I applied, and they have rounds of interviews, and I'm on the third round when they told me that my first assignment would be on Church Hill in Richmond. I don't know if you're familiar with Richmond, but
Not
that's
at
a
all.
very rugged area. I just wasn't sure about that. So I'm telling Joe, and he said, by this time he had finished law school. And he said, why don't you go to law school? And I went like, I don't think so. Watch Perry Mason, and I don't think I'm up for that. He said, well, you could do corporate law. That would be great for you. I said, okay, all right, that's what I'll do. So I said, I'll take the LSATs. And if I do well enough to get in, I'll go. And we lived about a mile from, probably less than a mile from the University of Richmond by that time. And he said, okay, and he brought me all these books to look at, you know, the how to study for the LSATs and this and that. And I kept, you know, like pushing them aside. And the night before the test, he asked me how far I'd gotten in the books, and I had to tell him that
Not very far.
not very far. And he said, well, like how far? And I went, like, page 1. So he was upset. But I took the test, and I did well enough to get in. And based on that test, they gave me a half scholarship. So they paid for half of it, and
Very
Joe
impressive.
paid the other half, and I went. So that's how I got to law school, totally by accident.
Boy, that's a meandering path.
It is, it is, it is.
So what year did you graduate?
Law school, 1978.
Okay, okay. And 69 for your University of Richmond undergrad. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So were you admitted to the bar in 79 as well?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your experiences in law school.
Well, talk about meandering. When I applied, it was in the summer of 76 when I
Okay.
applied to law school. And of course, by the time you take the LSATs and you take the application and you have the interviews and all that, it was too late to make the 76, 77
Gotcha.
year. So they said, well, you be number one on the 77, 78 list. I said, fine, so I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And so about 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant
Okay.
with Catherine. And everyone said, oh, you can't go to law school, you know, because you'll be, you know, she won't be born until June, and you'll be starting in August. And I thought, as only naive people who have never had a child can, how much trouble could a little bitty baby be? So I kept on. And then I realized that they have a time limit on the MBA. You have to finish within a certain period of time. So I was getting near the end. So I went back and finished that up. Well, I had my little bitty baby at my first year of law school.
Oh, wow.
So I could not have done it had it not been for my study team, a group of women who felt sorry for me. One was an older lady who had 7 children. And,
Oh, my goodness.
And her husband had died, and she'd gone to law school. And she was in the first year class. And the other one was a teacher who had quit to go to law school. She didn't have children, and later became a partner at Hunt and Williams, so she was very bright. And a third person and me. And they felt so sorry for me that I was doing all this stuff that they would just write out the notes and say, this is what it covers. I would read it to Catherine. We would walk around and read, and blah, 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 blah. Contract or no contract? That's what I thought, no contract. And so it worked out, but it was, little bitty babies are a little bit of work.
Indeed.
And Dad stepped up a lot for that, and
What was he doing at that time?
he was a lawyer. He was the in-house counsel for Ernst & Winnie, which is one of the big 8
Okay.
CPA firms. And he would come home from work at 5:15, and take Catherine, and I would go off to the study group. And then during the day, if I didn't have a class, I kept her myself. But if I did have a class, I had a lady who kept children in her home, and she kept her. But to show you what a different world it was, one fine day, an elderly woman, probably about my age now, came over to the house, and I answered, and I said, "Oh, Miss So-and-so," you know. She said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And I went, "Sure, you know, come in." And she said, "We ladies have been talking, and we think you leave your child too much with the daddy."
Oh, my goodness.
And I went, "What?" And she said, "Yes, almost every afternoon when he gets home, you drive off, and you're not gone long enough that that could be a job.
Oh, my goodness.
So we just think that you should cut it back a little and give him a break." And he was had her in a backpack, and he would mow the lawn and trim the hedges and, you know, whatever, walk up and down the street. And she's happy as a lark. But the ladies of the neighborhood were concerned that I wasn't being a very good mother, because I went off every afternoon. So I explained to her that I was in law school, and she went, "Oh." Like, can't imagine such a thing.
Right, right.
So, I mean, it was just a different world.
Yes.
And actually, in law school, I really didn't notice. I mean, I noticed that there were few women, but I didn't really notice that anybody particularly picked on me or, you know, tried to hold me back or tried to help me for that matter. But I mean, everybody was everybody.
Treated the same, basically.
Yeah. And since the four of us, and then there was Broadus Fitzpatrick's wife at the time, Joni, she was in that class, and we just went about doing our thing, and you know, nobody messed with us, so we felt fortunate.
That's wonderful. So, how did you meet Joe? Because obviously you didn't meet him in law school.
No,
Yeah.
no. I met him at the University of Richmond. I was taking second year French, because they told me I couldn't graduate early unless I had second year French. And I said, "Okay, I'll take it in summer school." And they said, "But you have to have first year French first." And I went like, "It doesn't say that." So I was already practicing my legal skills. And they said, "Okay, smarty pants, go right ahead." You know,
Take French too.
Take French too. So it took me all summer. I mean, literally day and night, because I had to look up every word and all that. But, you know, there again, it got done. And he was in that class too, taking second year French, but he had first year French. So, and he was interesting, and we liked each other, and we, you know, we had lunch occasionally because we'd be finishing up the class, but it wasn't, you know, written in the stars yet. And
Yes.
so he started law school, and that would have been a year ahead of my graduating year. He was here in the next up class, and he went to law school and was drafted out of law
Okay.
school in his first year, and had to spend 3 years in the military, mostly in Germany. And then when he came back, he's from Patrick County and knew Mary Sue Terry. They were in the same
Interesting.
school. And so then when I moved to Richmond to work at Smithdale Massey, we just happened to cross each other again. And then it was written in the stars.
So a little bit of a backtrack. So explain who Mary Sue Terry, Chuck Robb, and Broadus Fitzpatrick are.
All lawyers, as it turns out. Chuck Robb was a military hero and married Lyndon Johnson, the president's daughter at the time. And Mary Sue Terry was my classmate at West Hampton, and turned out to be the Attorney General of Virginia.
The first
twice.
woman Attorney General.
The first woman Attorney General, that's right. And who's the other person you asked me? Oh, Broadus Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
Is Judge Fitzpatrick's son, one of them. And he happened to be my classmate at the University of Richmond as well.
Very interesting.
And he's a lawyer, although he doesn't practice anymore. He didn't enjoy it, so he's gone on to fundraising or something. But,
And his father, Judge Fitzpatrick, was a general district court judge in the city of Roanoke.
in
Is
the
that
city
correct?
of Roanoke, he was much loved.
Much loved. So tell me a little bit about what was special about your husband.
he was a partner type rather than a, he never has tried to be controlling or, we talk. I mean, we decided early on that there'd be no secrets and no games. And, it just, like I said, he advised me along the way, and I've always trusted his judgment, so I did a lot of that stuff. My mother would say because he was making me, but that was far from the truth. He just was advising me, and I took his advice.
Okay.
So that was what, and then he was willing to help with Catherine in order for me to get, and I think a lot of guys don't want their wife to be above them in some way.
Sure.
Not a matter of smart, but not to do better or something. And Joe's never been like that, so it was good.
Very good. So what brought y'all to the Roanoke Valley?
Yeah, well, when I finished law school, I really was in a hurry then, because now I'm 30 and I haven't done anything, so I'm in a hurry. So that was one of the reasons I did law school in 2 years instead of 3, is so I could hurry up and get on with it. And I got a job with a firm in Richmond, Williams Mullen.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we were all ready to do that. Had made a down payment on a house, but another house, a better house really, because we were thinking maybe we'll have some success now. But Ernst and Winnie decided to open an office in Roanoke, and they wanted Joe to come with the group that was starting that out. And I didn't want to at first, but he said it'll be closer to my family, closer to his family, and
Sure.
so we decided that would probably be best. So we, had to go and tell them why I would not be appearing after they'd given me that kind of offer. And then I was in the market for a job again. And it happened that my mother was secretary to a lawyer who was actually in the real estate business named Jimmy Trinkle. And one of that firm's friends was Bo Rogers. So my mom said, well, why don't you go over and ask Bo Rogers for a job? And I'm like, I'm sure he would love that. But I did. And he said, well, I can't promise you, but I'll get you in front of the committee. And so...
So step back and explain who Bo is.
Bo Rogers was one of, Woods, Rogers, Muse, Grove, and Hazel Grove. It was at that time. And Rogers was one of the founding members, and this was his son, Bo, who at the time I was talking to him was probably in his 70s by that time, 60s or 70s anyway.
And it was one of the premier firms in Roanoke at that time, one of the larger firms?
Always debated whether it's Gentry Locke or Woods Rogers, but
right.
Yeah. But yes, they were. And the starting salary was very, very nice for a girl that grew up in Mount Pleasant. I was impressed by that.
So did you make it before the committee?
I did make it before the committee. And when I was talking to the committee, they said, well, we really have to have you go in and meet, Mr. Rogers, not Bo, but his father, who was like, in my 30-year-old estimation, he was probably 100, but 110, I don't know. But he was elderly, but he still had an office and came in every day and did whatever partners do. So I went in to meet him. They introduced me, and then just left me sitting in front of his desk. And we had a nice chat, and he said, I don't see any orange on you, so I'm wondering if you graduated from the University of Virginia. And I went, no, I graduated from the University of Richmond. He went, okay, well, you're not going to tell me that you wanted to be in the courtroom, are you? Because women have no place in the courtroom.
Oh, my goodness.
And I went, No, I wasn't going to tell you that because I think I'd like to be a corporate lawyer. He went, well, good. He called back in, and so they said I passed. And when they said, what did he say? And I told them what he said. They said, you're kidding, right? No, I'm not kidding. Oh, they were all very apologetic. But I said, I've got a grandfather, and, it's just the way that it is.
That's true.
So they said, okay, well, we'll take you to a nice lunch. And I said, oh, that would be so nice. And he said, have you heard of the Shenandoah Club? Well, we all had heard of the Shenandoah Club. I mean, it's, I'd never been there, but I'd heard of it. And so this committee, 5, 6 of the men and me, went over to the Shenandoah Club, and how they had I don't know if they still do, the big table in the middle for the lunch crowd.
Right.
And we sat around, and, we're looking. I'm looking, and I'm hoping that I know which fork is which, like all that. And while we're sitting there, I guess the maitre d', somebody in a little uniform, comes over and starts whispering to one of the partners that's on this committee. And, the partner says something, they say something, they go back, they come back again and say something else. The partner gets up and goes out and then comes back. And he said, they're just not having anything very good today. Why don't we just go down the street?
Oh.
And it turned out later that that's because the Shenandoah Club did not allow women as members. And if you weren't a member, you couldn't sit at that table. So there I am, kind of, breaking all the rules.
And they refused service.
They refused. I guess they did. I mean, I don't know what they said to him, but I know we got up and left. So
Did you tell your mother about
I
it?
did.
What did she say?
She said they don't let in minorities either. Okay. So, but of course, like the rest of the world, they've changed. So it was fine. But I have wondered in the past whether they offered me the job because they had messed up so many times. Maybe that's all it was. My husband said, no, I think it was your law review, where it says after your name, law review, and how many classes you booked. I think that was it. I said, okay, if you say so. It felt weird.
So were there any women attorneys at Woods Rogers when you started?
Judge Diane, who turned out to be Judge Diane Strickland, was employed there, but she was, for the most part, the time I was there, she was on maternity leave a lot of that time. And bless her heart, she tried to help me. She had Joe and I to her house with she and her husband, who's also an attorney. And, she tried to make me feel welcome, but she was not there a lot of the time.
Sure.
And there were no other women there, and for the most part, I don't believe that people knew how to treat a woman attorney, and I did not know enough to tell them how they should.
Sure.
And it's as much my fault as theirs, but growing up until I met Joe, I never knew a lawyer personally, with the possible exception of Charlie Osterhout.
Oh, wow.
He came to our church, had some sort of dispute, probably a boundary dispute, but I was too small to really know. But they hired him, and he came to a business meeting a couple times and told them what they could do. So, and I knew he was a lawyer, but my concept of what a lawyer was very vague. I knew it was somebody that advised you and they knew the laws. But, as to how they should act or what education they should have, or, I was just, and I think if I were totally honest, a lot of the time I was at Woods Rogers, I was suffering from, I don't know, imposter syndrome or something. I felt like I was playing grown up a lot of the time.
Right.
And I didn't know what I should do or who I should talk to. And I found out since, that some of the partners have told me since, that now they assign a person to be the sort of the chaperone, the mentor, whatever,
Right.
to each
Sure.
new lawyer to sort of, but I mean, I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't know that they should, so I didn't say, can you give me a mentor? So
I need a little help.
I just kind of was in my office doing my thing, and people would come in and say, can you do this? And, I would do it, and they didn't complain, so I guess it wasn't too awful, but it wasn't a comfortable feel. And sometimes a lawyer and his secretary would have a small spat, and the secretary would be in the ladies' room crying, and I was the only one that could go in there and talk to her. So
Sure.
I spent, I'm not talking about a lot of time, but I spent some time being sort of the mediator, like, he really didn't mean it. She says she'll come back if you don't yell, like that kind of thing. And I found, I know now that, I have had a lot more experience, like, close to 50 years, that I should have aligned myself with somebody.
Sure.
I should have seen who was a good personality fit for me, and just sort of shadowed that person, asked that person questions. But at the time, it made me feel stupid to ask questions.
Yeah.
And now I know that there are no stupid questions. If you need to know, you need to know. So, but, it was a different world. So, then a series of things happened, one of which is I got pregnant and lost 2 babies, like at the 2-month period.
Wow.
And it sort of reminded me of other women in stressful positions, and but I didn't really put a whole lot of stress on that, because I figured, well, these things happen. And then I got pregnant, and I was in my 5th month, and I lost that baby.
Oh, goodness.
And Diane, bless her heart, had told me, her gynecologist and OBGYN, so I was conferring with him, and he said, I cannot tell you that stress did this, but I can tell you that it did not help.
Sure.
And I said, okay, that's fine, and we lived through that. It's much harder. The further you go, the more connected you are with the little love bucket. And so I had a good long talk with the Lord, and I said, if you would just let me get pregnant one more time, I will leave. And I will go to, I'll knit or something. Anything. I'll just do it. And so, but, that doesn't happen like immediately. So I was working there. And then one day, the office where the firm was much, much smaller than this. It was nice, but they were cramped. And they had taken the file cabinets out of what would have been the file rooms to make them into offices, and put the files along the corridor. And so one day I was outside of an office, like if that door, it would be right there.
Yes.
And I was looking for a particular file, and I couldn't find it, and it was taking me a minute. And I was not eavesdropping, but the door was not closed, and a male lawyer was talking to a male client. And, I could hear that they were talking, but I wasn't really focusing on what they were saying because I was looking for the file. But then I heard the client say, I really would like a very competent female attorney to handle this case. And there was a pause. And then this lawyer, who has female children, said to this man, there's no such thing as a competent female attorney.
My goodness.
And so it's sort of, I'm ashamed to admit it, but it sort of validated the feeling that I was having, that I don't really know what I'm doing.
Sure.
And so I thought, well, okay, this is the good Lord telling me something. So I started looking for another job. And So Joe knew Jonathan Apgar, who turned out to be a circuit court judge, but at the time he was the chief assistant Commonwealth's attorney.
Okay.
And so he said, why don't you go up and talk to Jonathan? And I went like, I hated moot court with a passion. I don't want to get to court. I don't want to go to court. And he said, well, I don't think it would be the same thing because that's appellate work and this is something else. And you love teaching, and that's sort of what it would be. You're in front of the room kind of teaching a group of people what they should know about something. Okay.
Yeah.
They had an opening, so I went up and applied, and everybody was so nice. And they said, when you come, this will happen. When you come, that'll happen. This person will do this. And I'm like, okay, this sounds good. And they told me what the salary would be. A significant drop.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like more than half.
Wow.
But I promised the Lord already, so it's fine. And so I went. The last person I was interviewing, they made me interview all 5 attorneys that were present. And
Were they all male?
They were all male.
Okay.
And the last one, a man named Gary Thompson, but he turned out to be a really good friend of mine, but he lives in Norfolk now and practices law down there. But he said, I'm going to ask you a few questions, but really, I think we've pretty much decided who's going to get this position, and it's not you.
Oh.
And I said, oh, really? Because everybody's saying, even the boss said,
Yes,
when
yes.
you come. And he said, well, but this guy is friends of this guy and this guy, and so I really think he has the inside track, and I just don't want you to get your feelings hurt. I went, oh, don't worry, my feelings are hurt already. So, it's too late to get them hurt. I'm hurt. But I didn't say anything because he wasn't the boss. He was a low man on the totem pole at that time.
Sure.
So I just went on back to my office, and they called me the next day and said, well, we really enjoyed meeting you, and you're really on the ball, and we can't believe that somebody that was on law review is going to come to prosecute, but we just don't think it's right this minute, and we've given the job to this other guy.
Wow.
And they didn't tell me who it was, and I said, is it Don Waltice? And they said,
Oh, was it?
and they said, yes. How did you know? I said, well, okay, thanks for your time. And I was like very brusque.
Sure.
And so they said, well, we think we'll have another opening in about 2-3 weeks if you'd like to be considered for that. And I said, right. And in that exact tone of voice,
Yes.
right. And he said, no, really, if you come back, we think that you're good. So I went back, and sure enough, they hired me, and the rest, as they say, is history.
So who was the Commonwealth attorney at that point?
Donald Caldwell.
Oh, so Don's been the Commonwealth attorney for the entire time that you
Yes,
worked.
yes.
And when was that you took that job?
That was in 1980.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are you still working at the Commonwealth Attorney's
I'm
office?
part-time now. I
Okay.
retired at the end of 2018 as chief assistant, but I was still doing an occasional brief, an occasional, most people hate embezzlements, and I don't mind them, so I do an occasional embezzlement. For
That math coming up again.
that math, yeah, all that business stuff. So yes, I'm part-time there,
Okay.
and
Well, it's a long period to cover, so tell me a little bit about how it was at first. Obviously, there were no other women in the office.
no, there were not any other women.
And what was your initial experience?
They were all surprisingly accepting of me. I did not feel put upon by anybody in the Commonwealth Attorney's office. I mean, no weird stuff. And Donald I found out since then, he is not a person that judges folks by their nationality, their skin color, their sex, or I guess I should say gender. but I mean, he just takes you as you are, and you either are doing the job or you're not doing the job, and he
That's
really
pretty wonderful.
doesn't care. So yeah, so you know, I would say he's probably my best friend. With that developed, but when I went there, the person whose job I was taking, of course, had gone, so that left 4 other attorneys were present. Now they have 14 attorneys.
Wow.
But so there were four others, and they had told me that they would have somebody to be with me for a week or so. I've already been at Woods Rogers for right at 2 years.
Okay.
And so, you know, theoretically I should have an experience, but big firms settle most of their cases.
Sure.
So I'd only been in the courtroom twice in my life, and that was both at Woods Rogers.
That's amazing.
One was a case that fell apart through no fault of anybody at Woods Rogers on the first day of trial. I just can't remember what happened, but I remember we had a lot of notebooks. We had researched everything, and I was like third seat, you know, and so my job was, if somebody said, what's the law on X, I'd go find the notebook and open it up where it was supposed to be. So, and the other one was Bill Poff, who was just the nicest kind of a guy in a really rough cut way.
Yes.
Had sent me to do a landlord-tenant general district court case.
Oh my gosh.
Before Judge Dorman Norman, they called him Moore.
Wow.
And we lost. And so I didn't think the ruling was correct. And I came back and told Bill, this is not right because, you know, here's the law. And he said, I know. And that's why I sent you, because it's a clear law. And I said, but he ruled against us. And he said, I know, that's what you just told me. I said, well, let's appeal. He said, are you kidding me? This is a general district court case worth $400. You're going to appeal? But I would have done it in my spare time. I was so mad. But anyway, that was my experience. And so they said somebody would be with me, don't worry. But when I came in the first day, one of the lawyers was sick. One had been called out to do something somewhere else. One was at a training exercise, and Donald had to cover another court, so that left me.
Oh my gosh.
He handed me, in those days, the computer printouts were big, tall, pink things, and they had like the person's name and the charge and the section number and the officer's name. And now we have probably 60 or 80 cases a day. In those days, we had 400 cases a day.
Oh my
because
gosh.
the police were out. We were making money in those days.
Yes.
So they had to have the traffic court in the city council chambers because that's the only place that was big enough to hold them. And so it took me the first 10 minutes to figure out where this place was.
Wow.
Because if you know, the old courthouse, the Commonwealth Attorney's office was on the second floor of the part that faces out towards Campbell.
Right.
And the new part of the building, the city council's on the 4th floor of that, but the floors don't line up.
Right.
So you have to go out and down and around and up to get there. And I'd never been there, so it took me a while to figure out where I was supposed to go. And so I go, and of course, it's not rocket science. So, you know, you figure out after about 4 or 5 cases that you can just say, Officer Jinx, what happened? You know, and it's sort of automatic after that. But you don't know that when you're walking in. So about 11 o'clock, Judge Cornelison, do you remember him?
I remember Charlie Cornelison. Yes.
He was on the bench, and about 11 o'clock, he said, I'm going to take a break. And he said, so everybody go potty bottle. This time I was pregnant again.
Oh my gosh.
So I needed to go break. So I turned around from council table and head up the alley, up the aisle, and a older guy in bib overalls came towards me, and he said, "Ma'am," I said, "Yes." He said, "I need to speak to the Commonwealth's attorney." And I went, "Well, I'm the Commonwealth's attorney." I'm so proud. And he said, "Oh, I thought you had to be a lawyer." And he turned around and walked off, and I have not seen him to this day.
Oh,
I don't know
my gosh.
what that was about. But, talk about deflating your balloon. Maybe I hadn't done all that good a job, so it went. And then I had Judge Ballou, rest his soul, I loved dearly, and was
Circuit court judge.
circuit court judge, federal court Judge Ballou's father,
Right.
a judge among judges. But he called me in one day and said, "I would just want to tell you that nobody ever died and said, 'I wish I'd spent more time at the office.'" And I said, "I'm sure that's true." And he said, "Have you given it any thought that maybe you should be home with your babies?"
Oh, my goodness.
And I said, "No, really, I had not thought that." But he meant it so sincerely, so sweetly, so much from the heart. And he had 4 children of his own.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, just as, let's see, how do you have it? Anybody can be a father, but it takes somebody special to be a daddy. And I'm sure it's the same with mothers.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, maybe I should go home and be with my babies. But anyway, so it worked out. Those were the most, I guess when I was at Woods Rogers, they sent me to do docket call in Covington. And that's in the days where you had to go and sit.
Yes.
And again, being the cheapest person they sent me. And so I waited and I set the case, and all was well. It was ending. An older lawyer, male, I didn't see any females that day, came and said, "Could I take you to lunch?" And I went, "Well, I'd love to eat lunch with you." And so we went to a nearby place, had a sandwich and a Coke or whatever, and the bill came, and I'm getting out my money, and he said, "Oh, I'm treating you." And I said, "Well, I have an expense account, so, I appreciate it, but,
Let me do it.
Just let me do it. And, they're going to pay it, so I'm not out." And he said, "No, you're a lady, and ladies are treated." And I went, "Well, I appreciate that very much, but, they told me to bring back a receipt. I'm afraid what will happen if I don't bring it back." And so he said, "All right then." He said, "Let me ask you this." I said, "Okay." He said, "Are there any more little girls like you in Roanoke?"
Oh, my gosh.
And I went like, "I'm not sure. You mean like my age, or that are lawyers, or, what does that mean really?"
Right.
And he was very nice and very unenlightened, but it was a different time
Yes.
then. So,
Yes.
I've never had anybody be affirmatively mean to me from being a woman.
Just clueless.
They're just clueless.
I gotcha. How about when you were pregnant again? What was the support that you got, or lack of support? How did you get through, continuing cases, or after the baby was born, nursing? How did all of that get handled?
Well, so I just started there, so I didn't have any leave built up. I didn't have any maternity leave. There was no laws on the books for that. So out of the kindness of his heart, and I mean that sincerely, Donald said, "When the baby's born, why don't you take a month? And you can be off for a month." He first said 3 weeks, but then when the 3 weeks was up, it was the Commonwealth Attorney Convention in some other place. And he said, "I know you haven't had time to get involved, so take that week too." So that gave me 4 weeks. And they never told me that I couldn't nurse or pump or whatever, but there was no refrigerator, and there was no place to be private. There was no clean, well, it was clean, but I mean, it's a ladies' room that's open to the public, so it's not sterile by any stretch. And so I just just abandoned that at the end of the 4 weeks. So, and then for all working parents, it's who takes off when they're sick, who takes them to the doctor or the dentist or whatever. And so we had to work that out as we went. But
Did you have childcare in your house?
we started out with childcare in our house, but then you find out, like all mothers everywhere, that hello, I've decided to quit. I won't be there today.
Oh dear.
Or sometimes you would get it the night before, and that you'd feel lucky that they didn't abandon you after it was, and or they say, one day the police came to my office and said, don't be alarmed, no one's hurt.
Which alarmed you right away.
Right away, I'm scared to death. And my child care person, who I had instructed and pleaded with and asked for solemn vows that she would not take them in the car, because by this time I'd been a prosecutor for several months, and I realized that all manner of strange things happen when you get in a car, and none of them are good. And so, it said, just don't take them out of the house. And she had taken them out of the house and was in an accident.
Oh my God.
It was just a fender bender, but so you come to realize that it's hard to find a dependable person that you can trust. And I'm sure there are a lot of great au pairs and nannies, but I just couldn't find one. So we ended up at a child care center.
Okay.
And
Okay. So, what about the other women in the bar at the time?
Yeah, what about? There were some women in the bar, and if only I had had the sense God gave little green apples, I would have gone and talked to them, and but I'm sure they didn't come to me because they didn't want to appear, I don't know what the word is, bossy or
Sure.
intrusive or whatever, and I didn't go to them because I didn't think they would care or have time or whatever. So that is why I was so excited about the VWAA when I think you were the one that was getting it together, but you were certainly present. And when I heard that it was going to be about women helping other women, and there were going to be education, and there was going to be mentoring, and there was going to be, if nothing else, just swapping stories. This happened to me. Oh, it happened to somebody else, I was just so excited about that. And I got a lot of grief from a lot of the men attorneys, not necessarily my office, but others, about why, if I want to be equal, why am I going and being in a separate bar?
Very interesting.
Why am I going to be in the women's bar when I thought all this was about being equal? Well, it is all about being equal, but first I want to get to be equal.
Correct.
And this is going to help me. And even if it doesn't help me be equal, it's going to help me feel better about where I am in life. Because I don't really know about other age groups, but I know that my age group was sold a bill of goods because they led us to believe we could have it all, and you cannot. My daughter's an attorney now, and I told her all along, and she believes, but you cannot be June Cleaver, Perry Mason, and Mother Teresa. There is not enough time. I don't care how talented or how smart or how pretty, it's not possible. And if somebody tells you it is, they're full of it.
Right.
So I needed somebody to tell me that it was okay to choose and prioritize, and
Yes.
And I spent a lot of time, even at the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Nobody told me to. Nobody made me feel bad about it. But I felt like I had the weight of womanhood on me.
Right.
And I know that's stupid, but that's how I felt. I never wanted to go to a trial that I wasn't super prepared for, because people would say, that's what you get when you get a woman, or, like, she's got kids, so how can she prepare for a trial?
Right.
And I prepared for many of them in the middle of the night.
Yes.
Because you have to put the kids to bed and, whatever.
So tell me how you felt that you were treated by male members in the bar.
my co-workers in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, I was treated very well. Could not have asked for better. But by the bar in general, always politely, always civilly, maybe a little deferentially, especially by the older members, and they would. Well, there were some that would call me pet names, like in the courtroom they would say "sweetheart," this, or whatever, and totally off the subject. But my husband told me how to fix that.
What did he tell you?
He said the next time that this one particular lawyer did it a lot, and he said the next time that lawyer calls you sweetheart or honey or something, you call him a pet name, and then he'll quit because he'll know how it feels. And I said, oh, I couldn't call Mr. So-and-so by a pet name. He said, well, if you want it to stop, you will. So the next time that he said, sweetheart, this or that, I said, okay, lamb chop, and I went and handed him what he wanted. Well, unbeknownst to me, because like I said, I'm just not very astute, he was Jewish.
Oh, no.
So that was my own mistake, And nobody said a word. He never called me another pet name. And the judge told me after, he said, I know what you were doing, and I know that was not from a bad place, but a very unfortunate choice of words. So I had to go and, they didn't make me, but I felt like I ought to apologize. And I told him, I'm just trying to keep, I wanted you to know how it felt, but I wasn't trying to be ugly in any way. And I've done things that are sexist. Like, as a good example, we had Judge Ballou had a rule that women could not come to court in slacks. They must wear a skirt. And he had a very large brown skirt on a hook behind his door. And if anyone came in pants, any woman came in pants, that, not the audience, but any witness or attorney or whatever, he would call a recess and have a bailiff go get the skirt and a pen, because, it was swallow. You, for example, could have lifted 2 or 3 times around you. And so, that it was just a rule. So when I became chief assistant, Donald told me, I can't talk to the women about their dress, so it'll be your job. If you see anybody that isn't wearing hose or has on pants or whatever, you have to talk to them in whatever way women will accept and get them on the straight and narrow. So I did that. Well, along comes Ann Gardner, who is, a fiery little lawyer that we hired, a great lawyer.
Absolutely.
Weightlifter, but she's like this tall.
Yeah.
And she wears a pantsuit. It was a very nice looking pantsuit. And so I go in her office and I say, Ann, now, it's a beautiful suit. And I wish I had one like it, but you can't wear it to court. And so, let's just back to the dresses. So, and she said, are you for real? And I went, mm-hmm. She said, this is whatever it was, 1990 something. And she said, I don't even know if that's legal. And I said, well, Judge Ballou is still on the bench. And she said, but I still don't think we should we should just show up in our pants. And she said, if it's good enough for the guys, it's good enough for us. I said, okay, well, what they're going to tell you, you have to wear collar and sleeves and all that. If you're going to dress like the men, you'd have to have a whole suit. She said, I got a whole suit. I went, well, let me talk to Donald about that. So I talked to him, and he said, well, she's got a point. And I went, she sure does. So I went back to her, and I said, okay, we'll do it. We'll try it. So I bought a pantsuit. And
wow.
I said, I'll be the, because I have more seniority than she does. So, and I'm used to people yelling at me, so it doesn't bother me. No, I went to Judge Blue, and he called me back and he said, "What's with the pants?" And I said, "Well, Judge, we're sort of moving into a new era, and women think they can wear pantsuits." And he went like, "Okay." And that was the last it was ever said
Wow.
about it. And I personally have not had a skirt on since that day. I mean, that's the truth. My daughter laughs and laughs. She said, "I can't believe it took Ann Gardner to straighten me out." And I went, "Well, I'm just, oblivious.
Oh,
It
wow.
was a rule, and I was following the rule."
So do you feel that you were a mentor to the other women attorneys that came into the office?
Either that or they were mentors to me. We went both ways. And for a while, we had about 50-50. But the rate of the turnover, it's now like about 5 women and 7 guys. And we still have some vacant positions, but none of them have been hired or not hired due to their gender or color or anything.
Sure. So early on, what about dealing with the victims and the witnesses that you had to deal with? How was that?
I feel that it was very helpful to be a woman, particularly with domestic abuse and child victims,
Right.
both of abuse and other things. That I believe that those people related to me better than they did to some of the guys just because I was a woman. And I guess that's the flip side of.
Right.
I remember one little girl who was the victim of terrible sexual abuse, and we had her on the stand in circuit court in front of a jury, and she just sat there, and that was, now we have a victim advocate that's, and that's the law. But at the time, which would have been in the early 80s, there was just she was just there, and her mother was going to have to be a witness, so she couldn't even be in the courtroom. And I had spent a lot of time building a rapport with this child, but I mean, it's scary for adults to be in
Sure.
a big courtroom with the jury staring right at you and a judge and bailiffs and people in the background, and she just would not say a word. So finally, never forget Jack Kennett, an older lawyer who's passed, but he was on the other side, and he started saying, "Well, if she's not going to talk, I guess we can just move on to dismiss the case." And I walked over and picked her up. She was 4 years old, and set her in my lap, put my arms around her, and I said, "See that man up there? You just tell him what happened. I'm not going to ask any questions. You just tell him what happened." And she did.
Wow.
Now, you could not get away with that today. There is not an attorney in the entire universe that would let the prosecutor hold the witness. But it worked that day. And I think that's an example of how people can feel isolated and lonely and scared, and you can help.
Right, right. So is there a favorite case or a case that really stuck out to you over the course of your practice?
Oh, that's so many.
There have been.
Yeah. One of my favorite ones, especially on the topic we're talking about, was the Commonwealth versus David LaFawn. The victim was a Virginia Tech co-ed, and he had murdered her and put her in a cistern, I guess is what it would be, in Montgomery County.
Right.
And the defendant's aunt or somebody worked in the court system. So they had asked for a special prosecutor, and Donald had volunteered, and so he went up there, and he wanted me to help. So I was happy to do that. That's part of my job, and it was very interesting, and it was very complicated evidence-wise. And we had all this stuff. We rented a room in the only hotel there in Pearisburg at the time, and we rented 3 rooms, and I had one, Donald had one, and we had one in the middle, and they were connecting, and that was the war room, and Donald brought Joel up on this one day, and
Joel
so
Branscombe?
and there was the 2 of them and me, and we were in the war room, and then we quit, and we were going to bed. but they were in the same room. And so as I was gathering up my stuff to go to my room, I realized they were talking about the case. So I go over and bang on the door. And I went like, unless you all want me to come and get in bed with you, you better come back in here and talk. And so they did. But the thing about that is that, as you know, Pearisburg is much more rural than Roanoke.
Oh, yes.
And as we were going up for the first trial date, Donald said, I think I'd like you to do the opening and the closing, and I'll do the rebuttal. And I said, not sure that's going to really fly well up in there. And he said, what's the matter? I thought you wanted to be equal. I said, well, I do, but I want the best for the case. This is a very serious case. And if the people are going to feel like they don't want a woman presenting, you know, and he said, oh, get over yourself. And he said, they'll like you if you just talk to them like you always do, they'll be fine. So we got several bib overalls, one guy with a spittoon.
Oh my goodness.
And I just was sure that they weren't going to like me. So I did the opening. Of course, you can't tell, you know, they're just sitting there. We did the case. Max Jenkins was an attorney who was on the other side. And it was very hard fought, maybe 5-day trial, maybe 6 days. I think we were in the second week. And the jury went out. So, and I did the closing, he did the rebuttal. And I said, you know, they were out like 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. And I'm thinking, it's so clear, you know. And I said, I told you, you know, you shouldn't have done that. And he said, oh, it's fine. He said, and if it comes down to that, then, you know, we're lost anyway. So the jury comes out, they find him guilty, they give him that's when juries can sentence. They gave him the maximum they could have on all those charges. The judge said what he said, and then he dismissed the jury right from the box. And the jury got up, came around, and started hugging me.
Oh my goodness.
And Donald said, so who's potted meat now? So, I mean, sometimes you have it in your own head.
Right, yes. So, are there any particular judges or other attorneys that you've admired over the course of your career?
Oh, gobs. Gobs of them. You, for example, you know, Diane Perkinson, just because she's always been so kind to me. And, I mean, I could name all day. There are just, unlike the partner said, there are many, many competent female attorneys, and they're mostly kind-hearted too. And there are a good number of guys who will treat you decent too, as soon as you know it.
Well, you mentioned Judge Ballou.
Yes. Oh. I just love Judge Ballou. Yes, I very much admire him. He always tried to do what he thought was right, and you know, I'm not saying he never made a mistake, but who can you say that about? But he always tried hard to do what was right, and if you could point out the law to him, he would go with that, whichever side could do it. And he seemed fair, which is, you know, a gift.
And obviously you've remained with Don Caldwell for all these years, and he's your best friend.
Yes, and my very best friend, yes. You always know where you stand with Donald. He's so truthful. I tell him, you could just be quiet sometimes. You know? But if he tells you he's fine with it, he's fine with it. And also what I like about him is that he will never throw somebody under the bus. You know, if he told somebody, do this, or this is the way we're going to handle it, and they do, and then it blows up on them, he'd be the first to say, that was my decision, I'll stand by it. You know, he doesn't, and there are not that many people around who will do that when it comes to their reputation, especially if they have to be elected every 4 years.
Right.
And so I very much admire that and all the other lawyers who are truthful when they don't have to be, and you find out who they are.
That's true.
Over the course of your lifetime.
Yeah.
And
Well, my memory is that that back then plea agreements didn't have to be written, and they were it was verbal between the two attorneys.
right, and then you just told the court what it was, and then that's what it was. And occasionally somebody would say that wasn't what I said, or I didn't mean that, or whatever. But by and large, it was fine.
Right.
But apparently it wasn't fine other places, because now you have to write them out.
Yes, yes. Well, as a prosecutor, you've dealt with criminal fallout of many societal issues: abuse and neglect of children, domestic violence, juvenile delinquency, poverty, drug addiction and abuse, gun violence, and more recently, gang violence, to name a few. What do you feel your accomplishments have been in addressing these issues during your time in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office? What are you most proud of?
Well, I'm proud of the work we've done toward all those issues. Do I think gun violence as an example. We keep doing things, but I don't know that we've come up with anything that actually works. And so we keep trying. There's been the whole development of victim witness program, and we started out with volunteers. Jane Rennick, who's the wife of a lawyer in town, she started our program just as a volunteer. And then gradually it became one person, two persons, three persons, and now there's victims' rights. And certainly I cannot take credit for that, but I was involved in the movement, and I'm very proud of the progress that we made on that issue. For example, that you can have the lead investigative attorney in the courtroom with you when you're trying a case, even if he's a witness. I used to bemoan all the time that, the person with all the knowledge is out in the hall.
Right.
So, I need to confer with that person, but there was a rule that the witnesses were sequestered, and now there's a law that you can have that person. You have to choose if they're more than one, but still. And I'm really proud of a lot of the progress that we've all made together. I can't say, well, this is what I did, but I spoke at civic groups and taught at the Citizens Academy, and taught at Roanoke College criminal law, taught at Hollins College criminal law, and did my best to kind of spread the word and tell people if they're unhappy with something. Telling me is really not, I'll agree with you, but you need to tell the legislator.
Right.
So I'm proud of those efforts in sort of trying to develop people. And we have some people working for us that came through those classes, like Sherry Jones.
Yes.
Is an example of somebody that was in school and did a little internship with us and stayed. He wasn't planning to go into prosecution, but we nabbed her. And if I have a list somewhere of all the interns, and I bet you there are 1,000 people on that list.
Wow.
And I don't know. I'm really proud of all the progress that's been made in the justice system, and at the same time, I'm happy to acknowledge that there's a lot further to go.
Sure.
But we've come a long way, and I myself have come a long way, and I think other people have come a long way. So, in trying to understand what's going on with us folks.
So you mentioned the VWAA.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your involvement with the VWAA and what you feel like was accomplished.
Oh, there's so much accomplished, both for me personally and for the community. You Be the Judge is like a super example. And there again, it was not my idea, and I didn't do it. I had a little piece here or there, you know.
So you were president
I was president in 1994
of the state
VWAA.
Okay, and then you were on the board for...
I was on the board for a whole bunch of years.
Yes. And what is You Be the Judge?
Well, it's an educational program for anybody really, but we were targeting women, but we didn't exclusively make women. At least I didn't hear that we did. To show them what steps are necessary to get to be a judge, if that's your goal. And I guess I could have used it earlier. I ran for a judgeship once.
Tell me about that.
And well, it wasn't successful.
When was it, and what was the position?
General District Court judge, and I thought I would be okay at it, and I was, I don't know, it just seemed like the next step. But I was a little reluctant to leave the Commonwealth Attorney's Office too, because that is the world's best job. I'm sorry, it just is. But several, I mean multiple guys in the bar, not in my office, but in the bar, sought me out to counsel with me that this was not a good choice, that I should wait for a J&D spot.
Oh my goodness.
Because they didn't really say that's where women belong, but that was the tone of what they were saying.
Right.
You know, that I would be so much better off in J&D. And at that time, I had been the chief assistant for years, and I had tried, probably 500 or 600 murder jury trials, and while in the very beginning of my career I did a whole lot of child abuse cases, you burn out on that very quickly. You can only see so many scalded babies before you can see it in your sleep, and so I'd sort of cycled out of that. And for them to say, these guys to say, you should take your talents to J&D. That is an area that needs a lot of attention, and my hat is off to people like Lisa, who, are great judges, and they put their time and effort there. It's just not me.
Right. Right.
It needs to be somebody that's good at it.
Right.
But it sounds. You can only say so much till it sounds like you're tooting your own horn.
Right.
Like I really would be better. You can't say that. But I was really kind of overcome by how many people,
Yes.
how many men counseled me for that.
Wow. When was that, approximately?
Well, you can find out for sure because Judge Harris won. And
that was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Yes.
Okay.
I didn't try again because I realized while all that was pending that I'm not sure I really wanted to do that.
Right.
And when it came back that he had won, I knew this sounds so awful. We needed a person of color, diversity.
Yes.
We needed that. So that was a good thing. And on the other hand, we could have used a woman there too, but because we didn't have Jackie yet.
Yes.
But I was relieved.
Mm-hmm.
And that sense of relief told me that really wasn't what I wanted to do anyway. So
That's right.
I could lose with grace because it was good.
Yes.
So and then Judge Harris is my neighbor, so I was of course happy for him too. So
absolutely.
It was
absolutely. So when you talked about Lisa, it's Lisa Schifoni you were mentioning, who's a juvenile court judge now here in the 23rd Circuit, and then we talked about Judge Harris, and who was the third person? Oh, Jackie, Judge Talevi, Jacqueline Talevi.
Yes, and at some point she became the chief assistant public defender. At the same time, I was the chief assistant prosecutor, and we were good friends. She's a good lawyer and
is.
very level-headed and serious when you need to be serious. And I was so happy that she was selected for the bench. But it's such a roll of the dice on who gets to be it. And it's not really that you're saying that one person is more capable than another person. There's not a good way of choosing who will get to be that person.
Yes.
And I think the fact that we have had so many good judges is a testament to how fortunate and blessed that we've been, because certainly the way that they're picked was not calculated to do that. So, and the bar recommends people, but the legislature doesn't have to even consider it, let alone go by it.
Right.
And I had one legislator tell me that, they knew as well as anybody who should be the judge, who should be a judge. And, I guess that is true. And the other way of doing it is for them to be elected. And I'm not sure by the population.
Right.
And I'm not sure that's any better. I don't know exactly what the answer to that is. But I know when we get the really good judges, we get them by the Lord blessing us, and I don't know how we've had so many good ones.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned you be the judge, and kind of reflect on the fact that right now we have had 4 women judges selected for the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court bench, but only one circuit court judge
20 years ago.
20 years ago. And then that judge having been a general district court judge before she went on the circuit court bench, that being Judge Strickland, and then Judge Talevi being the only female who has been named to the general district court bench. Reflect on that, if you would. What are your thoughts about
Really?
it? Yes, ma'am.
I think it reflects that, we can know. I have several reflections. One is that we can no longer say, well, as I've been told many times before, well, there's so few women in the bar that you cannot expect many to be on the bench, because, if you just had a random draw, if there are 5 out of 100 women, then that's 5%. So, you're talking, and we have so few judges.
Right.
So that makes sense. And in a way, I guess it does. But then you think, well, now the law school is about 50-50.
Correct.
Maybe a little bit more women than men are going to law school. And there are a huge number of women in the 23rd bars.
Yes.
And so, okay, now where's my percentage? Where's my 50-50? And then you hear people say, well, but it's so-and-so's turn. Excuse me?
Right. Right.
I thought we were doing this on ability. Are we doing it on turns? Where's the line? We don't get some
Exactly.
women in the line. So I don't know. I have no answer. I just think that it's not, we don't choose them well, but I don't know that I could recommend a better way. And so I hope that there will be women like you, who will hop up and, get some support behind them. And, if somebody from Woods Rogers, say, or Gentry Lock, were to run for a judgeship, some qualified woman, and there have been some managing partners in the local areas that have run big firms, so they know what they're doing. If those people could get the whole firm behind them, that's a huge percentage of the vote. At least we could get a recommendation for some women.
Sure.
Then you could hop up and down to the legislature about how they're the problem. You know, but now if we don't have any women that are recommended, then you know, you really have no ground to. As Bill Poff used to say, you can't ride your high horse because you've only got a little bitty horse.
So interesting reflection then. If you look at now the Roanoke Bar Association, they're full board and their slate of officers are all women. Are you surprised about that? And what are your reflections on that?
Go, ladies, go. I am surprised in a way, but on the other hand, my mom used to tell me way back in the old days, and it's very true, if you want something done, ask a busy woman to do it because she'll figure out how to do it. And and in the churches, I think that's sort of fulfilling itself, that men are doing something else and women are doing the work. And the bar is like that too. There's a lot of work to be done there, and so these are people who are willing to do the work, and they happen to be busy women. So in that way, I'm not surprised.
And do you feel that the diversity that they bring is important, both
Yes.
for the bench and the running of the bar?
I certainly do. I certainly do. I think we could use more diversity, you know.
So, were you involved with the Roanoke? I know that you've always been a member of the Roanoke Bar Association, but were you involved with the Roanoke Bar Association?
In earlier days, when I was a busier person, I did that
Tell me
too.
about that.
I was on the board at some point, but it was too much. Like I said, it's a lot of work.
Sure.
And I was not willing to do the work, and it just doesn't seem fair to take up a place if you're not gonna, if you know you're not gonna
Sure.
be able to do what's expected or what's needed, really.
So you also have a strong record of civic service in the Roanoke Valley. Tell me about that.
Well, I was a member of Civitan, a group for many, many, many years. I have dropped out, and like I said, I on a rotation to do speaking engagements. I mean, there are literally hundreds of them. And I did a mentorship with a 4th grade class. That was something that the bar did back in the time when
Tell
I was...
me about that.
They assigned lawyers to be with a 4th grade class, and you had to agree to give them an hour a month. And now it's reading buddies, so you read. But then you could read, or you could talk, or you could have sort of like the presentation of the law, that
Yes.
kind of thing. I mean, basically whatever you wanted to do, just make a connection with a 4th grade group. And I happened to be connected with Ms. Evans at Fairview. And I mean, it was wonderful. All those little bubbly faces, and they had so many questions. Some of them related, and some of them off the wall. One time we talked about marijuana, and the little girl said, "If my brother is growing marijuana in the basement, should I tell somebody?" And I went, la 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 la. But what I've quickly found out was that an hour a month is really not enough to make a relationship. It's kind of like being grandma. You know, if you're not there, you're not there. So I started doing it once a week, and I would have the horse platoon. At that time we had a horse squad or something, and we did that, and we did the bike squad one time, and we did the bicycle squad one time, and we did, you know, we just went through the police department and the community. We had firefighters in one time, and we would talk about what they do, and then just be with them. They are hungry for attention at that age, and that was wonderful. I did that for a couple of years, but then I just couldn't keep it up.
Sure. So, you truly have been a trailblazer, but not only for women in the law in Virginia, and in particular in the Roanoke Valley, but also for the preservation and betterment of the Roanoke Valley. So what are your observations of the progress or lack thereof of equality of women attorneys in Virginia and elsewhere and on the bench?
Well, the quality of the women lawyers is fantastic, and I really think that they're much more on the ball than I was, and they know to ask what they don't know, and they know to network, and so I think that is wonderful, and I think we've all made lots of progress, but we just have to keep plugging at it so that we get equal pay for equal work. And I know that as soon as you say that, somebody's going to say, yes, but you took time out for your babies. But I really didn't.
Right.
4 weeks out of a lifetime is not that much. So,
Right.
and I know that, and I think that's where we have to go, that every female lawyer, like every male lawyer, has to decide where their priorities are. And if they're going to be super lawyers, that's great, but they have to work on that. And if they're going to be June Cleaver, they have to work on that. And we have to get over ourselves thinking that we have to do it all. You just have to pick what you're going to do and prioritize other things. And you've heard the story about the rocks in the sand,
No?
Yeah. Well, if you have rocks and sand and gravel, if you put the sand in first, that's all the little stuff of your life.
Right.
You have very little room for the big rocks that are important. But if you put the big rocks in first, and then you put the gravel in, it shifts all down. Then you put the sand in, and it'll shift in around there, and you can get a whole glass full of everything rather than just the sand.
Right.
And I think that if I'd known that 40 years ago, it would have been much better than knowing it today. But still.
So, what would you most like your legacy to be?
That I was a great grandma.
Tell me
really,
about that.
truly.
Tell me about that.
Well, I've 5 grandchildren, and I spend 1 day a week with them, and just be part of whatever they're doing. If they're having friends over, that's fine. If they're studying, I'll sit with them while they study. Whatever they're doing, I do it too. And when they were very little, we played on the floor and things like that. But my baby is 2, and my oldest one is 16, just
Wow.
driving. And so the other day, for the very first time, I got to meet her for lunch. She drove and I drove.
Oh, wow.
And it was so special. And so I would like when I pass on, if the 5 of them can say, she was such a good grandma. If they could just say that, I'm happy.
Betty Jo, this has been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you. It was fun. I told her when we first came in that of all the juries I've tried, I've never been as nervous as I was to come in here. I mean, that's because, I have this vision of this piece of film lasting for eternity, and what if I say something really stupid? And my daughter said last night when I was telling her that, she said, whatever you say, we're still going to love you after, so it's okay. And I went, all right.
Well, you did beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.